All right, let's jump right into this explainer, shall we? Today we're dissecting a pretty bold, honestly, kind of seductive promise hidden inside our source material. We're looking at this fascinating framework called the Architects of Achievement. And specifically, we've got to unpack that totally audacious claim right there in its subtitle, the singular secret of successful people. Now look, I love unpacking the hidden structures behind success just as much as anybody. But whenever I hear the word secret dangled out there like some magic password, my BS detector definitely goes on high alert, you know? Are we talking about a fleeting gimmick here, or is there actual structural substance we can literally apply to our own lives?
So, what actually is that singular secret? I mean, promising one universal master plan sounds an awful lot like a late night infomercial gimmick. We've really got to step back and ask, can one single blueprint truly work identically for a tech CEO launching a massive startup in Silicon Valley and an Olympic athlete training for the high jump? Naturally, just hearing the word architect makes you think of someone who has total control over their environment, their timeline, the whole shebang. But we all know real life rarely works that way, right? Real life is messy, it's unpredictable, and it is often stubbornly uncooperative with our grand designs.
And this illustrates the reality perfectly. Not everybody starts with the exact same advantages. If you're trying to build your career right now, you might feel like you're building on totally unstable sand. You're facing systemic barriers, zero funding, or just glaring environmental disparities. Meanwhile, it feels like the guy next to you was just handed this beautiful, completely level plot of solid bedrock. But here is the real kicker, the true secret revealed in our source material. It isn't about possessing a flawless plot of land. It's actually about adapting the rigorous methodology of an architect to whatever terrain you happen to have right beneath your feet. It's a highly adaptable process, guys, not some rigid magic formula reserved just for the lucky few.
So, how do we begin? Let's get right into phase 1, stress testing the schematic. By treating your ambitions as a schematic, you immediately strip away all that raw emotion and replace it with cold, calculating strategy. You're looking at your goals not as these fragile little dreams, but as heavy, load-bearing structures that need to hold up under immense pressure. In traditional engineering, stress testing means applying intense, relentless pressure to a structure until it literally snaps. You want to find exactly where that breaking point is before it goes into production. So how does an architect of achievement do this? Well, instead of crossing their fingers and just hoping everything goes smoothly, which, let's be honest, is what most of us do, high achievers actively try to destroy their own plans while they're still safely in the drafting phase. They're constantly asking, okay, exactly how is this going to fail? And this completely flips standard self-help advice right on its head. You know the usual line, right? Just visualize success, positive vibes only. Well, these architects of achievement swap out that pure positive visualization for a deliberate, almost mathematical mapping of failure scenarios. They aren't just sitting there picturing the triumphant ribbon-cutting ceremony. No, they deliberately hunt for the weak joints and the fracture points in their blueprints. Imagine planning a huge career pivot. They don't just visualize getting that swanky corner office. They visualize running out of savings by month 3, and they plan exactly how they're going to handle it. Take a look at this. If they're launching a company, they map out the absolute worst-case scenarios from day 1. Supply chain completely collapses, there is absolutely zero panic because they've already got a backup vendor identified right there in the schematic. Funding gets cut in half out of nowhere, boom, they already have a lean operating model drafted and ready to deploy at a moment's notice. They build these redundancies directly into their psychological and financial models so they just aren't caught off guard by sudden shocks. They don't just cross their fingers for the best, they mathematically map out disaster before it even has a chance to knock on their door. This quote really hits the nail on the head, proving your plan can withstand an earthquake before you pour a single ounce of concrete. That is what we're talking about. You're engineering resilience rather than relying on a lottery ticket mentality where you just hope the universe decides to bless you. Now, I know it sounds incredibly stressful up front to sit around thinking about all the ways things could go horribly wrong. But in reality, it's the ultimate safety net. It frees up so much mental energy because the worst-case scenario, well, it's already been solved. Once your plan can survive that hypothetical earthquake, we move to phase 2, chronological sequencing. Now, I gotta warn you, this sounds incredibly basic on the surface, but it's completely ignored by highly ambitious people all the time. We live in a super impatient culture, and that impatience is basically the enemy of structural integrity. Think about it. How many times have we tried to rush to the finish line? We're all guilty of it, trying to frame the roof of our careers or personal goals before the foundational concrete has even cured. And what happens when you build a heavy roof on wet concrete? Yep, the whole thing caves in.
High achievers, the true architects, absolutely refuse to execute out of order, no matter how eager they are to see the finished product. They are masters of delayed gratification. They know that patience is literally a structural requirement. They translate vague, abstract goals into rigid, unskippable dependencies. Just look at this progression. Step 1, the foundation completely cures. You absolutely cannot move to step 2, erecting the framing, until that first step is completely 100% done. And step 3, building the roof? No way that happens until the framing is fully bolted and structurally sound. Actually, scratch that. It's more like they respect the literal physics of progress. They never skip steps just to save a little time. I mean, you wouldn't build a house out of order, so why on earth would you try to build your life out of order?
Which brings us to what I think is the most fascinating part of this entire framework: the ultimate bait and switch. This makes the whole marketing of this secret wonderfully subversive. It plays right into our natural desires while delivering something entirely different. We are naturally drawn in by that seductive promise of a shortcut, right? We all kind of want that magic wand to bypass the hard work. But what we actually uncover in this explainer is a strict demand for deliberate, rigorous, and, let's be honest, sometimes incredibly tedious execution. When you start framing your professional goals as architectural endeavors, it just completely strips away that cozy illusion of the overnight success story. The secret? The secret is the architecture itself. The secret is that there is absolutely no magic, just math, meticulous planning, and a ton of relentless effort. And you know, while that lack of magic might sound a little daunting at first, I think it's actually incredibly empowering. This whole mindset moves achievement away from random, dumb chance and places it firmly in the realm of your own personal agency. It requires you to actively sit down at that drafting table with a pencil in hand, demanding total ownership of the design. Your goals become literal structures just waiting for you to draft the plans. It puts you in complete control, completely regardless of the uneven, rocky terrain you might have been handed at the very start.
But before we wrap up this explainer, we have to look backward for just a second to move forward. Let's talk about phase 0, site preparation.
Because before you can build any of those structures, and long before you can stress test or sequence your steps, you gotta prep the ground first. You have to clear the site. Why do we bring up phase 0 at the very end? Well, because you really need to understand the sheer magnitude of what you're building before you can identify the debris that's standing in your way. So I'm gonna leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on. If you are genuinely going to be the true architect of your own achievement, what outdated foundational beliefs must you entirely demolish right now before you construct your success? Think about those limiting thoughts taking up incredibly valuable space on your mental real estate. Clear the site. Demolish what isn't serving you. And then sit down at the drafting table and start sketching out your master plan.